Today we're going to talk about God and politics and how God plays into socialism and communism and the likes of Zohran Mamdani. Today we're going to be reacting and commentating over the Live Free podcast with Pastor Josh Howerton of Lake Point Church in regards to the topic I just mentioned. I think this is important to talk about because a lot of people tend to bring up the Bible when it comes to socialism. Lots of people tend to make Jesus this hippie figure that is just all welcoming to everybody and all your lifestyles, and that's just not true. Sin is sin, and we're all guilty of it. But when it comes to this specific topic, socialism and communism, Josh here has a lot to say about it, so let's listen.
I don't want to, so I'll just, for listeners, what I try to do is attack ideas, not people or parties. However, sometimes there's like actual partisan realities that's just like, hey, dude, we just want to be unfiltered and honest about it. Dude, I looked at this yesterday. Newest research by Pew. So this is a reputable, bro. 60% of people who identify as Democrats now have a favorable view of socialism. Let me say that again. 60%.
That's a scary number. It's a scary number for numerous reasons. One, Nicolas Maduro was just removed from power in Venezuela, a socialist communist dictator. They just voted for one in New York City. Zohran Mamdani. And not only did they vote for him, but now they are protesting against what the Trump administration did by removing Maduro from power, a socialist communist dictator. They're quite literally defending not only a narco-terrorist, but they're defending socialism, something that the Venezuelans are celebrating is over now that their president has been removed. So it's just something to think about. Where are their moral values really at here? There's so many examples in history and throughout the world where socialism and communism just don't work for the people. Hundreds of millions of people have died because of socialist ideals. And I don't know if they ignore history or they just believe everything that's spewed to them by the Democrats, but let's see what else he has to say here.
So what we're getting ready to show is, you've got an Islamic socialist. And honestly, the more he talks, the more I'm like, here's all socialism is communism before it gets guns. The language he uses, that's not a joke. Like, I've read some history books. Yeah. All socialism it's the exact same ideas. It's communism before it gets guns. The more he talks, bro, this guy is like actually dyed-in-the-wool communist ideals. Mm-hmm. So you got an Islamic socialist elected, by the way, in the same city where 9/11 happened about 24 years ago, little insane. And in his inauguration speech this week, he said some things that sent chills down the spines of people who are paying attention. Do we want to look at it?
We got a video.
This is at his swearing in. By the way, sworn in on what, Carlos, before we look at this?
Not the Bible, but a Quran.
I'm not a fan of that. As a Christian, knowing what I know now, knowing that Christ is king, I'm just not a fan of that. You can have your own opinion, but that's mine.
Yeah.
New York City's a little bit different.
Yeah,
That's right.
A little different ballgame.
Yeah. So let me just say something on that. Can I say something?
Please. I'm curious.
Whenever we talk about, you talk about Christian nationalism, whatever you want to call it. Whenever you talk about Christians should 100% want their government to legislate from a Christian moral perspective. Why? Because Christianity's true and everything else isn't. All right?
Let me touch on that. And I want to touch on that as somebody who was once an atheist, agnostic person who thought this was just all fairy tales, okay? All right. Coming from that perspective, I will say that when people said that kind of thing to me, that, hey, Christianity is true, it's like no doubt it's true. I would look at them like, okay, well, you're obviously just in an echo chamber or in a cult or whatever it is. The thing is, and this is the thing about God that people don't realize. This is the thing about God people don't realize is that for you to find God, you have to go looking for God. For people who automatically just turn that off and they're like, there's no God. This is all mumbo jumbo. It's all fairy tales. It's like Santa Claus, right? It's like the Tooth Fairy. When people shut their mind off and their hearts off to the idea that there is a God, you will not find God. You have to sincerely come to God and ask God, like, maybe you're real. I'd like to know, because it's kind of important, right? And that's what you have to do. But most people don't want to do that. And most people, in my opinion, won't do that because they're scared. They're scared because if they do ask that and they do get a response that they weren't expecting or looking for or even wanting, then they have to realize that, oh, now I have to change. But there's more to that. And we'll talk about the change part in another video. But let's continue this podcast here.
Romans 13 says that the role of the government is to be a terror to bad conduct and to reward good conduct. The obvious natural question that any reader of Romans 13 should then ask is, well, who gets to define good and evil? The obvious answer of Romans 13 is the living God, Jesus Christ. Okay, Now, before we watch this, go ahead and start pulling this up. We're going to watch this. So this dude gets sworn in on a Quran. Anytime we talk about what we just said on this podcast, we get a million people that are like, you guys are arguing for a theocracy. Now, I just want to point something out. In one sense, that's not true, but I just want to say something. In one sense, yep, you're right. And here's what I would say, okay? Every human government is some form of a theocracy. The question is, who's theo? All right? So if we're going to say that along with the Declaration of Independence, that, that all men are created, are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Okay, we agree. The question is, what's his name? His name Jesus? Is his name Allah? They're
not the same.
They're not the same. Even in a secular democracy, that's still a theocracy.
Yes.
The people are theo in that scenario. The people are functionally God. It's just pure will of the masses. So this is what Christians need to understand. Before we watch this, what Christians need to understand is you've been getting this play run on you forever, where anytime you say you advocate for your beliefs in the public square, people are like, oh, you're advocating for a theocracy. That person is advocating for the exact same thing. They just want somebody besides the one true God to be at the top of the system. So here's the big idea. When you remove God, the actual true and living God, Jesus Christ, when you remove God from being over the government becomes God.
He makes a good point here. Because if you're going to have a government under God, which God? Which God are we talking about? Because there's only one true God. Now, let's go ahead and put that aside for a minute. If you have a government under the Islamic God, look how well that's working out in the Middle East in many of those countries over there. Iran's rebelling against itself right now, right? Afghanistan's just essentially a nightmare for citizens there, for women there, for children there, right? And you have this God that advocates for the killing and the slaughter or the enslavement of non-believers. Meanwhile, Christianity is quite literally the opposite. We're meant to go out there and create disciples out of non-believers, yes. But nowhere does Jesus say that we need to enslave and kill non-believers. No, that's not what we do here. It's not how God commanded us to work. So to have a government that follows Christianity is a no-brainer to me. Let's continue.
Dude gets sworn in on Quran in New York City. Now, bro, this language he uses right here, bone chilling.
We will draw this city closer together. We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism.
Okay, boom, pause. We will, now listen, that'll slip past you. We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism. Bookmark that in your head. We're coming back to it. Now watch the rest of what he says.
If our campaign demonstrated that the people of New York yearn for solidarity, then let this government foster it. Because no matter what you eat, how you pray, or where you come from, the words that most define us are the two we all share: New Yorkers.
Okay. So let me, so for people who don't know what the quote unquote the warmth of collectivism is, let me read you some quotes to help you understand what he is saying. The individual is nothing, the collective is everything. Joseph Stalin. The interests of the individual must be subordinate to the interests of the collective. That's Mao. Okay. Everything in the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. And by the way, the state is the collective. That was Benito Mussolini.
By the way, all those dictators that he just named were responsible for hundreds of millions of deaths, instituting policies such as the ones that Zohran Mamdani advocates for. Read your history, guys. It's all there.
Then you have, will replace rugged individualism with collectivism, Zohran Mamdani. He's quoting like actual communists who have tried to institute actual communism. All right, so here's the difference between quote-unquote rugged individualism and the warmth of collectivism. Here's the question. So, by the way, Christians have to learn to think and apply their worldview to governance. Okay, here's why. Because if godly people don't, godless people will. Okay, so I
have to touch on that. That's a good point. I mean, I started this channel because I felt like politics needs more God. And when I found Christ, and I've always been passionate about politics, I wanted to find a way to do that. And Josh here, I mean, he says that perfectly. If the people of God don't play politics, then godless people will, and they will take over. Seen it time and time again.
We better learn how. All right.
And by the way, Pastor Josh, because when people hear this, they might be asking, wait, but why is a pastor talking about socialism? Isn't that like doesn't sound like Bible? What does the Bible have to do with socialism?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. So first of all, let me just say a few things. So first of all, so here's the question. The question is, I wrote this down. I want to make sure I get it right because it's really important. The question is, so in collectivism, we sacrifice the rights of the individual for the good of the many, the collective. In individualism, you protect the individual human rights from the tyranny of the state or the many.
Keep that thought in your head, what he just said there, all right? Because collectivism or socialism, basically what it does is it sacrifices the individual rights for the betterment of the state, right? Whereas individualism protects the individual's rights. So in socialism, what they like to do, and you hear it all the time, they want to take money away from the rich, forcibly take money away from richer people or more wealthy people to give it to the poor, right? And you're going to find out here, I believe that Josh touches on this topic on why that's wrong in the Bible and how that's not, biblical in the slightest, right? So let's go ahead and continue this.
Now, you asked the question, hey, Josh, what is this, what is socialism? What's this got to do with the Bible? Well, a whole lot. First of all, the entire Old Testament is based on the concept of personal property rights. Socialism, obviously, the end game of socialism is you'll own nothing and be happy. It's the state owns everything, and the state redistributes all possessions. Well, can I remind you of something called the 10th commandment? Like, literally, the 10th commandment in the 10 commandments, kind of a big deal, is you shall not covet your neighbors, and then it lists a bunch of stuff of your neighbor. So literally into the Decalogue, one of the 10 commandments is the assumption of personal property rights over against the state being able to infringe those things. Okay, so that's number one. Now, before I go on,
and don't steal too.
Other thought, yeah.
Don't steal is another one. It implies ownership.
Yes. Now, the question that people ask is it stealing if it's the government? Yeah. Yeah. Governments can commit theft.
Yeah. Yeah, what collectivism does is it doesn't eliminate greed, it centralizes and localizes it.
Bro, that's great.
It just go Google the houses of Stalin and Mao and Maduro, who got removed today, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just go look at their houses in all these socialistic places.
The champagne socialists like Hassan Piker, they're everywhere. They preach one thing and they do another. Rules for thee and not for me. If Hassan Piker truly believed in socialist ideals, for instance, he'd be giving away his fortune to the less fortunate every month. He likes capitalism, but he just hates America.
I will just say this. So as you watch this, what you're going to notice in socialism and socialism light, you'll even see this in California. You're seeing this right now. Whenever wealth redistributive policies get like max boosted in absurd ways, I want you to remember two axioms. So every Christian listening, you need to remember two axioms. Number one, progressives think in terms of solutions. Conservatives think in terms of trade-offs. This is really important. Okay, so what you'll notice is when progressives see problems, what they tend to do is just try to think of immediate straight-line solutions. Oh, some people don't have enough. Well, this is really obvious. We'll just take a whole lot from the people who have more and then give it to the people who have less. Duh, problem solved. Well, here's the problem. Is they never stop to think about second and third order unforeseen consequences. So for instance, why is it that literally this week, $500 billion in net worth left the state of California after they announced that they would be essentially doing a 5% wealth confiscation on the super wealthy? Okay. So progressives, they just think in terms of straight line solutions without ever thinking in terms of second and third order consequences. Wait a second. If we start like excessively taxing the people who create jobs, build businesses, and generate the most wealth, they might leave our state, and then the last state becomes worse than the first.
I've always noticed this with Democrats. They keep making the same mistakes over and over again. You know, this is the United States. There's 50 states, right? These businesses can go anywhere. And there's states that have very low taxes and low regulations for businesses. So in a state like New York or California, where they raise the taxes constantly on these businesses and on the wealthiest people there, do you honestly think they're just going to stay? No. They're going to move. They're going to take their businesses and their jobs with them. And what does that do to your state's economy? It tanks it every time. So right now you see that happening in California. You see that happening in New York City because of Mamdani, right? You see it happening in California because of Newsom. They're implementing policies that are just not conducive to productivity and that actually hurt the economy in the long run. And people are fleeing New York City and people are fleeing California in droves because the taxes are just far too high. And they're taking the jobs with them. They're taking their businesses with them. And what does that do? Well, the jobs leave the state and then people don't have jobs. Now you have more homeless. I mean, in California, they raised the minimum wage for fast food workers. And look how that worked out. I forgot the exact numbers, but thousands of fast food workers were just laid off. They were fired. And they were replaced with essentially machines. The companies don't want to pay the higher minimum wage. You raise the minimum wage too high, too fast, people lose their jobs. Now you have more homeless yet again. These policies don't work. They don't think about the consequences of their actions. But let's go ahead and see what else Josh has to say about this.
Okay. Whereas conservatives, what conservatives tend to do is conservatives tend to think in terms of those trade-offs. The biblical category for this is just wisdom.
Yeah.
When the Bible uses the word wisdom, it just means the ability to maneuver the world in light of its complexities. Okay, so that's number one. The second axiom that you need to understand is you watch this with Mamdani. You watch in the next few years, if he actually executes the policies that he says he's going to, the thing you got to remember is with governments, you tend to get more of what you incentivize and less of what you penalize. Okay, this is really important, okay? So for instance, whenever you get high welfare states or high welfare cities, what ends up happening is you're not solving poverty, you're incentivizing it.
100%. And you get more fraud along the way, too. You're going to get a ton of people that come in and abuse the system because it's such an easy system to get into, right? I mean, you see it in Minnesota, Tim Walz's Minnesota, what's happening over there with all that fraud. The fraud's happening in California as well. It's happening everywhere when it comes to welfare programs, right? And I agree with this 100%. You know, some people will get on government assistance and it incentivizes them to stay on it instead of getting their lives together, instead of getting a career, building a real life for themselves outside of the welfare system. And some of these welfare programs, their regulations are really, really ridiculous to where you are stuck in the welfare system because if you make 1 penny over what you're supposed to make, they just cut all your benefits and then all of a sudden you can't pay your rent. You know, because maybe that part-time job just paid just enough to where they cut off all your benefits. So it literally is incentivizing you to become a slave to the state. You see what I'm saying?
So this is one thing that conservatives generally, because conservatism, not perfectly, there's like a loose correlation between Christian theology and conservative ideology. Conservative, they tend to think in terms of when legislation happens, they tend to think like, what behavior will this incentivize? Okay, so here's what you got to get is like in the cities, real progressive cities are like, dude, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna max boost. This is like what Mamdani's saying he's gonna do. We're gonna max boost, homeless care. Well, what doesn't end up happening is you solving homelessness. What does end up happening is you incentivizing it.
And that's what happened in California, right? I think it's $100 million a year that went to solving the homeless crisis in California, and homelessness only went up $100 million. You probably could have given that money directly to them and would have done a better job of getting them off the streets than whatever it is they did do with that money, right? What a lot of people don't think about neither is these programs also pay people to run these programs. And for instance, in California, I don't know what the department it is, but the department that is in charge of that, all that money, that $100 million to help the homeless get off the streets, those people are getting paid. If they solve the problem of homelessness, they lose their jobs. So they have no incentive to actually solve the problem. So it goes both ways.
And so you end up with cities overrun with more homelessness. You do not end up solving homelessness. Why? Because with governments, you end up getting more of what you incentivize and less of what you penalize. That's why, like, there's that old axiom: the best argument against progressive policies is progressive cities. That's why you're seeing what's happening in San Francisco, all the cities.
Yeah,
that's it, man.
San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, all the same story.
Same thing.
Yeah, I wrote down 3 things when we were getting ready for this in terms of just about socialism. Just 3 things. It isn't biblical. It doesn't work. And it's incredibly stupid and harmful.
That's a pretty strong argument against
It's a pretty strong. Let me just go through each of those and maybe even go through maybe some rebuttals of what people often say. It isn't biblical because you guys laid out some things about private property, but they'll say, well, like, what about in the New Testament? It seems way more collectivist, like everybody was sharing. But what you don't neglect was even in there, even usually when people think about that, they're thinking about Acts 4. We're talking about there was no needy among them, but they shared everything. If you go to Acts 5 and the story of Ananias and Sapphira, a lot of times people say, oh, they were struck dead and judged because they didn't give everything and they were selfless. That's actually not it. It's because they lied. Because actually, if you go to Acts 5, he says, why did you keep back part of it? But then he says, what remained unsowed, did it not remain the states? No, that's not what it says.
That's right.
Did it not remain the churches? No, did it not remain your own?
Bro, that's great. That's a great catch.
And after it was sold, was it not at your disposal? So Peter is actually going like overboard to try to make the point of you didn't have to do this. Whereas in socialism, it's coerced. Actually, what you see here is it's private property, and generosity is to the individual. It's not force. So then, for example, if you go to 2 Corinthians 9, there is this idea where Paul is collecting money for people who are in greater need than the people he's writing to. But he specifically says he does not want them to give under compulsion because God loves a cheerful giver.
I love this podcast. You can check out this podcast at Lake Point Church YouTube channel. It's called the Live Free Podcast with Pastor Josh, and these other 2 gentlemen. Let me get their names for you here. Carlos Arazo and Paul Cunningham. Fantastic podcast. I love it. They talk about a lot of things. They talk about God and they talk about politics. So I thought I'd go ahead and react and commentate over this. And if you'd like to see more of these, just comment below, like the video, watch it through. Let me know what you thought. Put your opinion down there. If you disagree with anything in this podcast, that's fine. Just disagree politely and try to have a polite conversation down there with the other people. All right. Much love. God bless you. Christ is King. And I'll see you when I see you. I'm out.